Hi everyone, this is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today I'm going to tell you how to respond to some of these viral articles that seem to go around like once a year saying that either the Zodiac has changed, your sign has changed, or there's a 13th sign. Okay, so I'm doing this because I get flooded, like it seems like clockwork, like once or twice a year, someone circulates like either an article, yeah, it's usually an article that says NASA declares that your sign has moved, or that the dates of your sun sign are no longer accurate, or that there's a 13th sign or something like that. And of course, people who are into astrology that they suddenly they really worry, like, oh my gosh, astrology is this real? Is this true? Should I be worried about it? Or if you're a student of astrology and people know that you're into astrology, then they might send you the article and be like, ha ha ha, see, Susie, I told you this is the devil's, this is the devil's music. So, or you just have that friend who's really skeptical that's like, look, Sheila, you need you need to look at this because NASA told me that your sign has changed. So I don't know if you even know what you're doing with this astrology crap. Anyway, surely you've had this happen to you before, or you know somebody who it's happened to, or you've seen the articles. Maybe you've seen some good responses to this already, but this is a video that you can use. You could always, post somewhere or basically offer to people who don't know a lot about ancient astrology or the history of astrology. First thing to understand is that astrology is not a science, it's a form of divination. So while astrology utilizes astronomy, it is not a one-to-one correlation. Not everything about astronomy is identical to what we do in astrology. That is not to say that astrology is not reasonable and that astrology is not rooted in the observation of the heavens. And in ancient times, there is such a close overlap between astronomy and astrology that they're, in some ways inseparable. But it is not a science. It is not, by and large, ancient astrologers do not believe that the planets are causing things to happen or that the signs are causing things to happen. They believe that the planets and the signs and the zodiac and the language of astrology is symbolic, which is to say that it is a study of signs, not causes. Just like a tarot card that you flip over doesn't cause something to happen. This is an example I've used a million times. Like if you're into the divinatory art of tarot and you flip over the sun card with the little child on it, the sun card does not impregnate you and make you pregnant. It doesn't make the pregnancy happen. It just signifies, or it correlates with what is going to happen, which may be, among other things, the birth of a child. Signs, not causes, first of all. So we're not a science. Now, that's not to say that there isn't that we shouldn't be concerned or interested in how it is that divination works. What kind of universe, what kind of reality do we live in that divinatory systems can both describe and predict phenomenon very accurately? From missing objects to missing people with horary astrology to accurately, predicting when someone's going to die or when someone's going to be married or what finances will do or how an investment will go. Astrology is not always 100% accurate. It depends a lot on the sensitivity of the astrologer, the intelligence of the astrologer, and the methods that are being used, especially in my opinion, whether they're traditional or not, but that's an aside. But it's not always accurate either. So let's just issue that as a qualifier. Take some pressure off from us, because usually these criticisms will be launched at astrologers by people who believe that astrology is a pseudoscience. No, it's one step better than a pseudoscience. It's divination. Right? And if you have no interest in if you can't validate the reality of divination from the get-go as a historical religious spiritual phenomenon on planet Earth, then we don't really have much to talk about. If people are claiming that astrology is a science, like a normal empirical, like modern empirical science, fine, we're in line for some criticism. But ancient astrologers didn't think of astrology like that. It's a science. It's a science of omens and signs, not a causal science. So Now, that being said, again, astrology is highly astronomical. The tropical zodiac, which is used in the West, is a zodiac that is configured and aligned with the unmoving points of the equinoxes and solstices. 0 Aries is always aligned with the spring equinox, 0 Cancer with the summer solstice, 0 Libra with the fall equinox, and 0 Capricorn with the winter solstice. 30-degree intervals of the 360-degree circle are distributed to 12 different sections, and those are our 12 signs. So we have a 360-degree circle that is the ecliptic, the path of the sun from our perspective on Earth, geocentric perspective. And that ecliptic, it's like the sun's racetrack, is 360 degrees, a big great circle in the sky. We divide that into 12 equal components of 30 degrees each. Those are the 12 signs. Why 12 and not 13? Because there's roughly 12 lunation cycles and change in a solar year. So we're taking the great circle defined by the sun and dividing it into parts defined by the moon. The marriage of the zodiac is thus the marriage of the sun and the moon. And so, and it's an ideal, it's an ideal symbolic system, right? So the way that those 12 signs are divided is according to the 4 seasonal quadrants of the zodiac. Aries starts the spring. You've got 90 degrees or 3 signs from Aries at the spring equinox up to Cancer at the summer solstice, when there's then 90 degrees or 3 more signs from Cancer to Libra at the fall equinox, 3 more signs from Libra to Capricorn, constituting the fall, the autumn, and then from Capricorn back to the spring equinox, 3 more signs, 90 degrees. That's how it's divided. Your time of birth, your date of birth, is moving through that system, and that system does not change. It cannot change, and it does not change because it's fixed, and that's what defines the tropical zodiac. That's what has defined the tropical zodiac for thousands of years. So when people say, hey, you know, your sign has changed, first of all, you just say, no, it hasn't. That's the simple answer, is it hasn't. And 2, people who say that it has are not familiar with the history of astrology and the way in which the zodiac was both designed and oriented. So the second part of this is to say, well, what are they talking about then? Well, what they're talking about is the fact that the constellations in the sky that were once correlated with the 12 mathematical portions of the ecliptic have moved and are moving. And they move relative to those fixed points of the equinoxes and solstices. Sometimes you hear this called the precession of the equinox. What does that mean, though? Practically speaking, it means that there is a fundamental difference between a sign and a constellation in the sky. A sign in tropical astrology is a 30-degree section of a great circle that is 360 degrees. And again, that circle is divided according to the unmoving points of the equinoxes and solstices. So in that sense, your birthday falls somewhere around those 360 degrees. The sun will have been at one of those 360 degrees, and that doesn't change. Now, long ago, when ancient astrology was first getting started, there were constellations in the sky that were loosely correlated with those mathematical sections of the circle. But make no mistake, the constellations are not the markers of the signs in any mathematical sense. They are not the way, we don't measure the planets in any way in tropical astrology according to the constellations. Imagine that you take a circle on a page, draw a 360-degree circle, then mark off 30-degree chunks, right? Then outside of each little 30-degree little zone that you've made, draw a picture. And the picture is just denoting, helping you understand which portion you're dealing with. But the portions themselves, the alignment of the portions will never change. They're fixed, they're permanent. Now imagine that very, very gradually the little pictures that you drew are moving relative to the different hash marks of the circle that you've drawn. That's what we're talking about when we talk about the precession of the equinox, or the idea that the constellations are moving very slowly relative to the equinoxes, which means that the constellation in the sky that once was correlated with the 30-degree section of the zodiac that represented Aries, the constellation of Aries is now drifting relative to that mathematical zone of Aries. Early on in the history of astrology, ancient astrologers recognized this, and there was great debate among ancient practitioners as to, whether or not we should stick with the, tropical zodiac, meaning that the zodiac is fixed according to the fixed astronomical points of the equinoxes and solstices, or if we should try to adjust the zodiac and adjust it according to the continued movements of the constellations. Basically, this debate led to two different kinds of zodiacs that formed in what was roughly the exact same horoscopic tradition. On the one hand, you had the tropical zodiac that said, look, the constellations are not actually the important thing here. It's the mathematical portions of the great circle relative to the four seasons. So, for example, what makes Aries Aries is that it's symbolically, the first 30 days of spring. What makes Taurus Taurus is that it's the second 30 days of spring. And what makes Gemini Gemini is that it's the third 30 days of spring. Roughly. Another way of thinking about it is you could say, what makes, let's say, Capricorn Capricorn is that it starts, or it coincides with, the darkest day of the year, the day when the arc of the sun, the arch of the sun in the sky, is lowest down toward the southern horizon. That's the starting point of Capricorn, gateway of the gods. Now, that is more important than the sea goat constellation image that was associated with that time of year. You see what I'm saying? So in the West, that tropical zodiac became the established zodiac, because astrologers decided that the zodiac in the West was considered to be more of a ideal mathematical alignment with these 12 portions of the great circle, aligned with the unchanging positions of the equinoxes and solstices. Now, in the East, largely in the East, Indian astrologers had a different view and decided to modify, not by just one system, but by several different systems. They modified the measurement of the zodiac according to the continual movements of the stars. That's called the sidereal zodiac. That's what it's called today. So in Indian astrology, you'll have several different systems that track out and kind of modulate or reconfigure the measurement of the zodiac relative to the continued movement of the stars. But you have to understand that, first of all, what's amazing is that both zodiacs work. It's in layman's terms, it's a bit like saying, I'm going to use a 12-card tarot spread, and another one's like, I'm going to use a Celtic cross. They're just different ways of aligning or kind of, I think of them as sort of different ways, different lenses through which to understand the nature of the zodiac. Is it more rooted in the stars, or is the zodiac more rooted in the unchanging patterns of the solar year in the northern hemisphere, which are the equinoxes and solstices? Both are symbolic considerations. Ultimately, we shouldn't take them too literally, but either orientation works. And if you don't believe me, just get a reading from a really good Vedic astrologer in India. Get a reading from a really good predictive astrologer, Hellenistic style. You'll see that, I've had Indian astrologers predict unbelievably accurate things about my life, using a zodiac that's very different than the one I'm used to using. Well, my zodiac works all the time. You know what I mean? So these are different symbolic orientations of how we measure the zodiac, one by the movements of the stars, one by the fixed rhythms of the seasons. Not one is really better than the other, in my opinion. And people who try to make it about one being better than the other, in my opinion, are sort of ignorant. No offense to people who really feel like going on a crusade about it, but I don't think it's worth it. So at any rate, these are divinatory symbolic positions that have been a part of astrological discussion for thousands of years. And so the thing that's really maddening about these articles that come out is, of course, that what you're doing is you're saying, you're spreading this information. People who don't know about the history of astrology and who don't know that there are these two very different schools, some that track or don't track the movements of the stars relative to the ecliptic, and the measurement of the zodiac and so forth. And you're filling them with the idea that, like, oh no, something's totally changed, which can then, of course, call astrology into question, as though we're not aware of something because we're not really scientific. Well, it turns out that people who are saying this, who are claiming to be scientific, actually aren't historical, which means they don't know what they're talking about. They haven't actually read, or they don't understand the history of astrology well enough to understand how the zodiac is actually measured. They don't even know that there is a debate and that astrologers are already aware of these different ways of measuring the zodiac. So that they just, if for anyone who's actually learned on the subject, they just make themselves look kind of dumb. No offense, that's just the truth. On the other hand, they also spread this this worry and this concern that astrology is somehow off or it's changed. And then astrologers like myself, at least a dozen times a year, I end up having to address this topic, right? So it can be really, really maddening. Now, some people will also say something about a 13th sign, and the basic reason that that's not a part of astrology and has never been a part of astrology is because astrology is about the union, the sacred union between the yin and the yang, mapped out in this kind of astronomical symbolic picture. The solar year is the one, and the dividing or duality of the one into the many is made by the moon and her roughly 12 lunar cycles per one solar year. So you have the 1 and the 2, which is also numerologically 1 and the 2 is 12. And so the full circle divided into 12 parts, the 1 made into the many, the 1 in the many and the many in the 1. So that sacred symbolic marriage between the sun and the moon has always been there. And so people who are like, oh, there's a 13th sign. Well, yeah, I mean, you could add 10 more signs if you wanted to. They just didn't. That's just not a part of this system. It's not like it would be like saying, oh my God, you left out Falcor from the Neverending Story in the tarot deck. It's like, well, he's not really left out. He just wasn't really a part of the divinatory system. He wasn't part of the way that this system was imagined. Oh my God, Luke Skywalker isn't in the tarot deck. Well, you see, and that's about as absurd as it is to suggest that you need a 13th sign in order to be more objective. It's like, well, the point of this was not to be objective. The point of this was to create a divinatory system, and it was made according to really deep and brilliant rationale. But it's rooted in the union between the sun and the moon, and the sacred thinking behind that led to one circle divided into 12 parts. Take it or leave it. Make up your own zodiac, make up your own system if you don't like it. So people who are always insistent upon this 13th sign or whatever, it's it's nothing against the idea that there's other signs, or that there are other constellations, or that there's an unending amount of interesting astral omens to be considered. But the ancient system of astrology was rooted in the numerological and astronomical correlations between the sun and the moon. We have 12 months in a calendar year, 12 signs in the great circle. That's where it comes from. It's not missing anything. So at any rate, that's the gist of it. So that's the 13th sign answer. Some people will also say, oh, maybe 13 is somehow being short-suited. There's sort of, it's not a tidy even 12, it's not a perfectly coordinated 12 months per solar year. We know that there's 12 and change in a solar year, lunation cycles. So, but of course the symbolic union between sun and moon was the point. And so finding the rhythmic picture of the cosmos that we live in, the harmony of the cosmos, the harmony of the lights, and the way that they create a time signature in reality that we all participate in, that we're still participating in today. That was the point. It's not to say that there aren't other time signatures out there, or there aren't other rhythms, or that there aren't other potential ways of understanding ourselves in relationship to natural phenomenon. But the more literal people get about these things, the more literal their complaints tend to be. So at any rate, so that's an answer to that. So no, if you're practicing tropical Western astrology, your sign has not changed, and astrologers have been aware of the fact that the stars are moving relative to the equinox point for thousands of years. It formed a major part of the debate between the sidereal and tropical zodiac. You can definitely follow the sidereal zodiac if you want to. It's just not big news. And if you do follow it, know that there are not just one sidereal zodiac, but there's several competing ways of measuring the sidereal zodiac. Know also that it's probably a mistake to think that one zodiac is better than or more accurate than another. When it comes to divination, divination tends to work through entrainment. A shaman beats his drum in a certain rhythm, or a medicine woman shakes her rattle in a certain rhythm and utters songs or medicinal healing songs in a certain rhythm. The student sits and learns to shake their rattle in the same rhythm, repeating the songs in the same rhythm. Right? So when we are learning divinatory, ritualistic, spiritual techniques, almost always the most important thing that we do is we entrain ourselves to a kind of pattern. The pattern embeds itself within us. It's like a program we start running, in a sense. I say this after spending 10 years of my life studying Amazonian shamanism. With astrology, it's very similar. If you would train yourself to a zodiac, to certain techniques and methods in astrology, it's like you're learning a vernacular. It's like a grammar that you're learning. Is there only one language? Is there only one dialect? Is there only one grammar or rules of the way that the sky can speak? No, there's many, right? So it's not, but it is important to entrain yourself to one. So if you listen to my channel and you follow my stuff and you practice Western astrology, my advice is, just stick with the tropical zodiac. I don't think at the end of the day, I think it's kind of a fool's mission to try to figure out what the more objective zodiac is personally. But people feel free to disagree with me too. That's fine. I remember when I was in India for an East meets West astrology conference in Calcutta, and I saw astrologers really going after each other about which zodiac was better. And I just thought, have you not had readings from astrologers in both traditions yet? And have you not had an amazingly accurate experiences? I've had an Indian astrologer predict down to the very month that I would deal with a very particular medical condition. And I've had an astrologer in the West predict down to the very week when my grandfather would pass. So those are two different zodiacs, so that's my take on it. Anyway, I'm rambling at this point, which only happens usually when I'm really irritated about something. And I think I'd gotten like a dozen emails from people being like, I read this article that said my sign has changed. I read this article saying there was a 13th sign. Oh my gosh. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do a pissy video about it. So anyway, I hope that this has been educational. I did this kind of off the cuff. If I made any mistakes or something came out wrong, usually I have notes and stuff. I'm at my mom's place. Like some of you know that I've been visiting my mom for a bit here in Michigan. So if I missed anything or if I said anything incorrectly, this was a little off the cuff. So feel free to correct me, any of you astrology buffs out there who noticed that I got something wrong. All right. And by the way, these are differences that I discuss at length in a more structured way in my classes as well. My next class starts in November, so we'll be starting to advertise the next program probably by September. So you can stay tuned for that. If you like this kind of stuff and you want to get more invested in astrology and learning more about such things, you have all the greatest comebacks in the world when your friends throw these articles at you. You can check it out on my website. All right, that's what I've got. I hope you guys are having a good week. Take it easy. Bye.